Digital, and I'm a business strategy consultant. I'm here today with two of my colleagues, another Conor Normile, and Colin Wilkinson. And today we're going to be giving each our own perspective on working at the intersection of business, design, and technology. I'm talking about how you can balance these things and really work at the intersection. You can drive real value for your business. And also talk about some of the challenges and realities of working at that intersection. So I'm going to kick off with cross-functional teams. Cross-functional teams can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. So I like to describe the type of cross-functional team that can have real transformative effects on a business and some of the foundational things that they can do to be successful. Cross-functional working is very much associated with business transformation. I think it would be hard to find a company that's not having some sort of business transformation program. And that can mean anything from they've got agile development to design thinking, they've moved to the cloud. But really transformation should be more about the outcomes, that you have better customer experience, that you've got better time to market, you've realized those efficiencies. I think for a lot of companies, it's the drivers can be fear-based. It's like everyone else is doing it, we need to transform or die. How can we stay relevant with all this change and technology out there? Our startups and the fintechs are going to eat our lunch, we have to do something. And as a result of that, the business impact has been very much off target. Wipro recently did a poll of over 400 multinationals in the US to the senior execs, and the results were that 50% of transformation initiatives are not meeting their objectives, and 20 are considered a complete waste of money. So, not very positive. There's also lots of reasons given for why it fails, and around lack of focus, lack of consensus. So, cross-functional working is obviously not doing its job. There's a lack of ability to get things done, and leadership cannot make it stick. And if you go behind this again and say, why is there a lack of focus? Why is there a lack of consensus? What we see time and again in all the companies we would talk to is that they would say, oh yeah, we're 2 or 3 years into a transformation program, but a lot of the investments continue to be made in a siloed fashion. So yes, they've got agile development teams, but those teams take the designs from a completely separate strategic design team. And in turn, the reason for doing the whole thing in the first place is done by a business team that's completely separate. This is not cross-functional working. And I know you might say, oh, the agile team has a product owner, it has a designer to manage the handover. Once you're into managing handovers, you lose a lot of value and you lose the synergies that's supposed to exist between these three things. If these three things are all separate, what you're going to have is a different view on why we're doing it in the first place, what we're trying to achieve, and then ultimately, what is our capability in delivering it. So if all these three things are working together, it should be more like this. You would have a business, a design, and a technology team are all working in unison on a common goal, and that common goal should be a specific customer journey. And they should have full ownership and autonomy for that customer journey. And that's different from an agile team having ownership of the delivery of the customer journey. This team should have ownership for the business impact of the customer journey, the revenue, cutting costs. It should also have ownership of the customer experience and the design, and then finally also for the delivery and the technology that goes into it. And when you have all these skill sets together, working in unison, then they can really come together and understand their capability to have maximum impact. I like to make this analogy of a band. So you think of a band, there's lots of different skill sets. You got the drummer, you got the singer, you got the guitar player, but they all have to come together in harmony in order to make a good song. If you like, it's the togetherness of the skill sets that's more important than the individual skill sets. It's that sense of tightness that enables them to make great music. Similarly for a cross-functional team, they have to own the customer journey. They need to have all these skill sets: business strategy, design, architecture, agile delivery, DevOps. But it's enabled to all these skill sets to gel together. And it's much easier to do that when you have a common goal. So a band, the common goal is the song. For this team, the common goal is the customer journey. That enables them to learn by doing. It enables that cross-pollination where the business learns about the capability of the dev team learns about design, and everybody starts to understand each other, speak the same language. And when you get that, then you start having a sum greater than the parts effect. The other thing you can do then is get the balance right. Of course, these teams are trying to be customer focused, do the best they can for the customers, but it has to be based in reality. Do the things that you know you can actually deliver that will have maximum impact. And because these teams are all working in unison, they have a much better view of what they can actually achieve. And then when you structure around customer journeys like this, then the whole company structure can follow that. The demand and governance function understands the capabilities of these teams, are metric driven, and can support them in the way that will enable them to be successful. Similarly with leadership, it's a lot easier for leadership to make it stick and empower these teams when they have full ownership of the customer journey. We have seen this where chief executive would bring the team in the room and say, this customer journey is crucial to our business. It generates a lot of revenue. You have been selected to drive this forward and own this customer journey, and the sense of empowerment that comes out of that is extremely significant. So that's how cross-functional teams can be structured, but what things can get them rocking? How can we get them to be successful? The first thing they need is a method. Now, there's lots of methods out there to move ideas from insights to delivery. This is one we use. And what we're going to talk about other than say it should be cross-functional from end to end. Typically, you would think that initially it's design, and then design hands over to the developers. But you think about it, at the insight stage, the technology insights, the business insights, the customer insights are all equally important. And it's that synergy in the middle of bringing up all of these together, that's where the value is. And it requires a team that's tight and together to be able to find that value. And it's the same the whole way through, even at the develop stage. How can you prioritize? How can you drive the most value out of this? And to be able to run a method like that cross-functionally, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to talk the same language. And to do that, it's great to have cross-functional artifacts. So these are artifacts that we would typically use, customer journey maps and service blueprints, and they would be usually considered as design artifacts, but they can be extended to include the technology lens and the business lens, so that at each touch point, you say, what is the business impact here? What is it doing to revenue? How can it cut costs? Similarly for the technology lens, how can we leverage our capability to do a better job here? In service blueprint, it can link the customer experience right down into the technology layers that are going to deliver it, and that enables a cross-functional team to optimize the entire delivery of the customer experience. And when you do your build, measure, learn, and everybody has a common view, they all understand that, they all get each other, and they know why decisions are being made. Another thing this team can do is properly define a problem. Such a simple thing, but in so many organizations, all the stakeholders will have a completely different view of what the problem is. And that's because problems can be viewed from many different lenses, the customer lens, business lens, and it's together teams that can actually look at the problem and define the problem properly. And when you really understand your problem, it's a lot easier to come up with the opportunities. A great tool to ideate opportunities is assumptions mapping. If you haven't used it, you should check it out. Basically enables really engaging conversations about what makes this desirable, feasible, viable, and it also enables you to prioritize what's important, what do we know, what do we not know, and then you can go and validate your assumptions. The team then can have a collective ownership of the way forward, how they're going to reimagine the customer experience. You think of it, they've all been together in defining the problem, they've all been together in the opportunity assessment. It becomes a really positive conversation then about how are we going to drive this forward, what are the things we're capable of doing that's going to have the most impact, and that enables the prioritization to be a lot easier as well. You make your bets, you prototype, you validate. And then you iterate, and it's that constant thing, do our customers want this? Can we deliver it? Should we be doing it in the first place? Do we need to course correct? And the more they do this, the team comes together, they get that togetherness, their skill levels increase together, and then you have a team that's rocking it, and you get better customer experience, you get better time to market, you cut your costs. I guess for teams that do that, we salute you. So I'll hand over to my colleague Conor now.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a bait and switch. We're not, in 10 minutes, I'm probably not going to give you the holy grail answer to integrating design and development, but what we will do is talk a little bit about how we're making it work in Wipro Digital, and hopefully give you something you can actually take away and use on your own teams. So Conor mentioned the benefits of cross-functional working. Integrating design into a cross-functional team is really really challenging. So I'm going to talk about how we're making it work, things that are working for us in Wipro Digital. This is the old deck, but anyway, we'll go along with it, right? So design thinking. First, let me talk about how designers typically solve problems, all right? So my own background is experience design. I worked for most of my career on the agency side, where we come up with lovely solutions, chuck them over the fence, and not really worry about the complexity of having to deal with them. So, I'm the favorite kind of person for you guys. There's a reason design thinking is a big deal right now. It's a really powerful way to solve problems from a human-centered perspective. I won't go through it, but just in a nutshell, this is really the design process. Design thinking is just a label for how we design. We empathize with the customer, define the problem space, generate lots of ideas, pick the most promising ideas to prototype, test out with customers. Ta-da, we have a solution, right? Simple as that. Anyone who's worked in enterprise will tell you that we're not even at first base, right? So we don't get to work on greenfield projects. They're typically complex, messy projects, legacy systems, entrenched ways of working, and all that fun. This is the gap where great ideas fail. As I said, I've typically worked on this side of the fence, of the cliff, let's say. We come up with a great design and it gets corroded through compromises, the necessary compromises of delivery. Now, thanks to Agile, continuous delivery, etc., we no longer see spectacular project failures, but we do see degraded experiences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do to try and close that gap. The most effective tool, hands down, that we have to build alignment across our teams is the service blueprint. Right? So you're probably all familiar with the concept of a service blueprint. I want to talk about the particular way we use it in Wipro Digital to get our teams on the same page effectively. For those who aren't too familiar with a service blueprint, the way of mapping out the complexity of services, it aligns customer experience with backstage business processes, and it's simultaneously customer-centered and enterprise-centered. Now, it's typically the domain of a service designer. I need to be really careful here because I have a few service designers in the room who have a holistic kind of bird's eye view of the entire end-to-end journey. There's a nice official definition. Okay, and in a nutshell, this really is the framework of a service blueprint. So we have our customer experience up top, our to-be aspirational journey. We have all the back office interactions, and we also map out IT systems and processes that enable that customer experience to happen. So it's a very simple framework. It's how you use it and what you put into it that makes a difference. Now, typically, and this is where I might get in trouble with my service design colleagues, but typically it's the domain of service designers, right? So we're really good at this part, what the customer sees, okay? What that to-be journey is going to be. We're pretty good at looking at the back office stuff, what employees do, what the interactions are. And to be frank, we kind of pay lip service to the bottom bit, the scary technical stuff, all right? Because that is not our domain, right? So when we have a service blueprint that's owned by design alone, managed and maintained and driven by design alone, we're really missing a trick, because it is a powerful tool. And this, here's where my birds come in, one sec. So basically, let me explain this with some animated birds, right? The trick we're trying to explain, why we're missing this trick is because one of the biggest problems with design and development in enterprise is the problem of altitude, right? So the service designer is necessarily operating at 10,000 feet. They have to operate at 10,000 feet. They're looking at designing a holistic experience that's going to be good for the customer, right? They're looking at the entire end-to-end journey. Our Agile teams are at the coalface of delivery. They're operating at very, very close to the ground altitude. And that's necessary for what they need to do. So here's our... I got feedback that he was flapping too fast, so I actually slowed him down, but this is the old deck. But anyway, we'll go along with it. So, the service designer is looking at big picture, business strategy, customer insight, constantly interacting with the customer to refine that journey, because it's always changing, right? We're in an enterprise environment. There is no single Yoda that has all the answers, so it's constantly acquiring more information, course correcting. They're looking at holistic design, the end-to-end journey. Our Agile teams are looking at all the rituals of daily life for an Agile practitioner. Ceremonies, sprints, stand-ups, and not to mention, last but not least, actually developing code. By necessity, this team is operating at a lower altitude, right? But what you need, what's absolutely critical, and we've learned it in the work that we do, is that we have constant altitude exposure between these two players, two groups, right? And by constant, I mean every day, or every 2 days, or at least every 3 days, these guys are interfacing with each other's altitudes. And this is how we solve this altitude problem with the service blueprint. We take a bit of a twist in it. We go really deep, we do two things. We go really deep, working together, so that's everyone from platform engineers to front end, to our enterprise architects and designers. We go deep in bottoming out all the technical stuff that's going to make that experience happen, and we co-own this artifact as a team. So let me show you an example. This is look at this beast. This is actually journey for UK Bank that we're developing. It's a fairly straightforward journey up top. It's a journey that a hiring manager will take to recruit new people and onboard into the bank. But there's massive amounts of complexity under the hood. So up top we've got a customer journey. We've all our actors, so everyone from the hiring manager to the recruitment team to the guy who's going to approve the hiring request and how they actually interact with each other. We have our systems, so we have lots of legacy systems we've actually got to talk to. We have some new systems to replace old spreadsheets, for example. We've also documented our API calls. So this is where we have all the team working on this together as a combined kind of collaborative endeavor. And we also have the data, what data we're actually capturing, and some metrics down below. What are we measuring at each point in the journey? Now, and up above, we have our wireframe. So we use an interactive prototype to iterate on the experience, and we'll document those wireframes right up above our blueprint. Now, just to give you an example of how this has helped us, this has helped us avoid massive mistakes on our projects that could have cost weeks of wasted effort. Agile Lean, it's all about reducing waste, right? So, just to give you an example, so we had an interaction. We were user testing, right? User testing our prototype of this journey. One of the stakeholders said we need a certain thing. It was a nice to have, and for us it was just a drop down in a prototype. It's a very easy thing for designers to do is put a drop down in a prototype. Because we actually on a daily basis we're gathering around this artifact. One of the first things our platform engineers said is, okay, what system is that going to talk to, this particular drop-down? We then realized, because we have an API called Swimlane, we don't have an API for that system, right? So suddenly this very simple thing surfaces up what could potentially be a major blocker. Now, if you think about the traditional way of doing this, we'll write up some user stories, those stories will go in a backlog, and maybe weeks down the line we'll encounter this major blocker. This way we could see, okay, we can plan for a spike to solve this problem. We've got a bit of runway. And we can even go back to the client and say, look, this is actually a big deal. Do we really need this feature? What actually happened here was one of the platform engineers came up with a much better design solution than we could have come up with. This only happened because we have this shared artifact that we all kind of coalesce around. Making it work. I've got 2 minutes to tell you how to make it work. So tips for yourself. First, own it as a team, right? So you're going to co-create this with stakeholders, but what's crucial is that you have the entire cross-functional team that Conor mentioned working on this continuously, right? That means bringing people out of their comfort zone, right? A front-end developer is not particularly used to doing this, right? So what's crucial is everybody's involved. You get people to stick things up on the board, take abstract conversations, make them concrete by actually pinning them up to our shared picture of understanding. Secondly, make it visible. Have it on your war room, have it on a big wall. It is a beast, but put it up on the wall, constantly use it. Thirdly, keep it alive. Post-its are restickable 7.8 times on average. Use that to your advantage. Things change. It's not a deliverable, it's a tool. As Colin says, it's a visualization of 1,000 discussions and decisions. And finally, very quickly why it works. Shared sense of ownership, common context. It allows us to translate between design and development. Better planning, faster course correction, and tighter teams. Oh, and easier handoffs. Final thing is give it a try. We've done this with client teams. It's a one-day workshop just to get them up to speed. It's a very simple approach and it's working. Clients are actually using this approach now. Okay, I'll hand it over to Colin.
So yeah, thanks guys. The guys have talked a lot about the power of the teams and the tools and capable ways of putting those things to work. But there's a big missing piece in what they've been talking about, and that's the people. And whenever you start off on a transformation journey, that's probably the most important thing. And they also about how do you make that stick with them. And so I'm going to share with you a few of the traps that we've seen people fall into when they start off on a journey like this, and then also talk a bit about how you bring the people on board with that. So the first thing that happens a lot is that people talk about, go, transform, change. You have to do all that, but sometimes forget to say why. You really need to explain why we're doing this, and it's usually not change for change's sake, because that wouldn't be very sensible. You really have to look at, well, why are we doing this? What value is it going to bring? And explain that, articulate it, and keep explaining it to people, because sometimes that just gets lost in the noise. The second thing that people fall into is thinking they can just buy it. There's lots of people, most of them are probably in this room today, that will gladly help people to do transformations for a small fee, of course. But really, if you're in the person who's wanting to do this, you have to do the work as well. You have to put in most of the effort. The people that you bring in will be the people who will help you, they will guide you, but you really need to put a lot of work in to understand what it is you're getting into and what the sort of hard decisions you might have to make down the line. So thirdly, the other thing that you hit into, particularly in a larger organization, is what we call the immune system. And what does an immune system do when it feels like it's under threat from a big scary change? It attacks. And you don't want to be that particular thing that is getting attacked by this, because they're very strong systems. They have been built up over years. They're embedded in the hierarchies, the silos that are there. And Craig Larman in particular, he's the guy who wrote all the stuff around large-scale Scrum less. He came up with a set of laws that are kind of partly tongue-in-cheek, but they really talk about, captures the effect very well. And this one in particular is my favorite because it says effectively that the new thing that you want to actually introduce basically gets boiled down to be the same as the old thing, and they just call it a new name. And so I think we've probably seen that a few times. And the other thing with that is that that is a very strong reaction that people can have. So you really need to tread carefully and understand the changes that you need to make, and you need to be able to disentangle that kind of organization if you're going to try and turn an organization into something that's truly cross-functional. Then we see the frameworks. People sort of want to rush out and say, "Well, we need a framework. We have to do Scrum. We have to do something." Don't start there. Look at this stuff. Like, this is what we've done, people. We've made this. We've made this diagram. It's a fantastic piece of work that these guys have put together, but pretty terrifying, I think. How do you start with something like that? And so, you really don't need to start there. You should start really back with basic stuff. Like, go back to the Agile manifesto. Look at the principles there. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can look at. You can start small and do a lot of work before you need to start to decide exactly what framework that you want to use. Because again, this is the sort of stuff that people get lost in, and they get overexcited and over worried about what framework. And really, remember, these things are just tools and a means to an end. And kind of alongside that is this odd effect that we really like to tell people what to do. And what's worse about that, again, is that We actually let people do it, and sometimes, I'm sure you've also had the effect where, you have to learn something new, and it's like, oh, well, can somebody just give me the steps and write it down for me, and so that I don't have to think about it? And there's your problem. With a transformation scenario, what you really need, thinking and learning are two of the key skills that you really need to be encouraging and making sure people continue to do. By giving people a playbook, you're driving them down a particular way, and it's like people start doing things without knowing why, and that's not a good place to be, and it creates bad behaviours all around. So those are the sort of typical traps, who says. So let's bring it back to the people again. And when you're starting off on this, one of the things you want to try and do is to create the space, create the environment for people to, do their best work, to create a positive environment for them to. Sorry, I have to change my page. To be able to work in this new way, and you could call this maybe a social contract of sorts. But the thing with a lot of this stuff is that, while you want to try and move people from maybe a position of fear to a position of safety or trust, trust is something that you can't just give to people. You have to earn that trust, and you have to display this by the behaviors, by the attitudes, by actually living this stuff. You can't just make it happen. You can't just tell people that they have to do this. So everybody is involved in this, and you need everyone to kind of have this sort of an agreement where everyone agrees. And another way you see this sometimes is expressed in prime directives and things like that, where everyone is trying to do their best and they bring their best person to work and all those kind of things. So this is sort of a similar idea. So maybe let's look just about some of the actors that are in the system and the people that you're going to be involved with in trying to bring a change about. First one are the sponsors. They're the people who are paying for all of this stuff. So their biggest thing they really need to do is keep explaining why and provide that imperative for people. They really need to know why we're doing this. They need to keep people on that line. They also need to be the people who provide the cover and create that world of safety and the empowerment of the teams to go and try things and to be safe, and knowing that if they do fail from time to time, no one's going to get blamed, no one's going to get punished. That's part of the process. So the next people that you look at when you're on your operation transformation is to the people who are the change agents. They're the people who, they're going to be the people you're going to appoint to try and, bring that change through with the teams. And one of the big things, again, like rather than telling people, they need to listen. Listening attentively, listening actively, listening appreciatively is a very good skill to have, because you really want to know what is really going on and what are the real pain points, because that's one of the places you can quickly build support and build that trust, is to address some of that pain. And be a real facilitator. I think Henrik was talking about this morning about not having that ego and having things change without you ever being pointed back to you that you were the cause of it. Like, that's a good thing. You don't need to be the person who's thanked for it. And then of course there's everyone else. What we're trying to do is to create the environment for everyone and to give them that permission to engage, to experiment, collaborate, and to get excited about what it is you're trying to do. And if you can get that sort of stuff going, then you're well on the way. And finally, we talk about making it stick. And maybe who better to ask about making things stick than people who are in the business of stickiness. If you read the back of a bottle of glue, what does it say? It says prepare your surfaces, spread it evenly, and maintain a bit of pressure. So what do we need to do? We need to do our homework. We need to do that work up front. We need to understand the culture. Be prepared for what is coming your way. Spreading it evenly, get everyone involved, get the collaboration going, foster that cooperation and co-ownership. And then the maintaining the pressure. The reason they tell you in glue to maintain pressure is because it takes time to create that bond. It takes time for people to work together, to understand each other, and to really, get working well together. And then, that's when maybe you can have the band singing in harmony, and you can sing and all that good stuff. So I think that's where we go to. Okay. Thank you very much.